What up, everybody? It's Chris Orozco with Operation Moksha, and today we're going to be talking about how emotion gets stuck in the body, why that is a bad thing, and ultimately what you can do about that to get all the emotion out of your body, into the world, integrated, and bringing you into a more harmonious state of being. This idea that emotion even gets trapped in the body in the first place. I find this to be true, and this is because anybody who's ever had an anxiety attack or intense emotional experience like that knows that you experience those emotions in your body. You experience them in your gut, in your chest, or in your back, or in your fucking sides, or your hips, or wherever. They show up somewhere in your body. And what ends up happening is, for the people of us that don't have a lot of somatic awareness, you may not be aware that this is happening. But what does happen is as that emotion gets triggered from somewhere in our body, if you decide that you don't want to feel that emotion, you kind of just clamp it down. And so you literally put a lid on whether or not that emotion is allowed to express itself and leave your body. But as you do that, you're not only clamping it and saying that it doesn't get to be expressed, but you're saying, stay the fuck right where you're at in my body and do not move. Totally understandable thing to do. These emotions are very uncomfortable to have to feel them. Oftentimes it's even more uncomfortable to be open to them enough to allow them to move through your body. So it makes perfect sense why we would want to say absolutely fucking not. You stay stuck here in your little hole until the end of time. Now, this is okay to do and it's totally understandable. However, you have to understand what you're doing when you're doing that. Because these emotions really want to be expressed through you, and the parts of you that generated those emotions have really important messages for you. So what ends up happening here is this part of you that has something important to say to you, and you are the only person capable of listening to it. It has now nobody to listen to it. It has its own fears, it has its own needs that aren't getting met. It has all these reasons for it to want to be expressed through you and to be heard and validated and understood and be cared for. It has all these reasons to force its way into your conscious mind, however the fuck it has to. As it gets more and more scared, and as it gets pushed away into its deep dark corner for long enough, it gets more and more upset, more and more scared, more and more angry, more and more hopeless and desperate, or whatever it might be. And so it has to resort to more and more intense measures to get your attention. This is where self-sabotage comes from. This is where intrusive thoughts come from. This is where a lot of some of the most troubling psychological experiences that we have come from. This part of your mind has a lot to fucking say to you, but it's stuck in your body somewhere. So what ends up happening is as the emotions get more intense, you will notice behavioral changes that this part of you is trying to get into your conscious mind and explain to you what it's afraid of and what it needs and how to deal with it. But you also may notice physical symptoms as well. Like I know for me, I grew up with a lot of shame around sexuality because I grew up in a family of Jehovah's Witnesses. I was born and raised into a family of Jehovah's Witnesses. And if you don't know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses, they're not the most sexually open and expressive people in the world. In fact, they're the exact fucking opposite. So those are the value systems that I grew up in. Now, as an adult, what I noticed was all that sexual energy that was trapped in my body actually started giving me lower back pain. Now, it's controversial. You can say whatever the fuck you want to say about it. I don't really care because this was my experience. This is what I know to be true because as I started connecting to this stuff in my lower back and started expressing it and finding outlets for it, the pain would start to go away. And the only time the pain ever comes back is when there's a new layer of it to be faced and integrated. So to me, I see the somatic relationship between emotions and things like pain and sickness and all those types of things. I kind of take them for granted. Because I know that if I haven't been taking care of myself and I've been pushing myself too much, maybe not drinking enough water, trying to get more work done, not resting, not playing, not doing those things, I know I'm going to get sick. I know that if I keep a certain amount of repressed energy stuck in my body, eventually it's going to turn into some kind of illness or pain, and that kind of has always been the case for me. So whenever I get sick, I actually look at what psychological causes may have caused it. Now, there's plenty of books that will explain to you what all these different causes are, and I'm not going to pretend like I have enough information on this. I'm not a doctor. I don't know shit about shit when it comes to this. But what I do know is 9 times out of 10, if I genuinely sit and ask myself what thoughts and emotions have come together to create either a sickness or a behavioral pattern or some kind of physical pain or something like that, if I actually ask the question with enough sincerity, then I will ultimately get an answer. I will understand what caused it. And then if I express that emotion through my body, the physical pain goes away, I get better, the behavioral pattern goes away, or whatever it might be. Now, I want to give you a really strong example of this. And again, you can judge this however you want. I don't fucking care. I'm not saying this as a statement of fact. I'm not a doctor. I don't know this shit. But what I do know is what's worked for me and for a lot of other people. people. So the example that I want to give you is, I think this happened like 2 years ago or something like that. I was working out in my room, I was doing some push-ups, and I heard a snap and my back went out and I collapsed. It was the single most painful fucking thing I have ever experienced in my entire life. It felt like there was such an intense contraction around my lower back that I thought it was going to snap my spine and potentially kill me. And this lasted for like 3 days of just intense pain. However, a good friend of mine named Nathaniel, who I run a men's group with, told me about this book called Healing Back Pain, which I'd heard about from a friend prior with some really cool results as well. And so I got the audio book, I was laying in bed, didn't have shit else to do. And would you believe it, by the time I got halfway through the book's called Healing Back Pain. I forgot who it's by, I'll put a link to it in the description. But as I read halfway through this book, I started to see myself in the examples of the book and understood that what was happening in my lower back that was causing all this pain was repressed rage. And so as I understood it to be expressed rage, and since I'm good at expressing my emotions, I got the rage out of my body. And by the time I was halfway done with the book, I could get up and walk to the bathroom. And this is just the most stark example I can give you of things like this. But I've had a ton of examples where either I had a fever and I did some emotional practice and then I got better. The fever went away. This thing in my back. I've had a ton of other different experiences like this. So for me at this point, I kind of take it for granted. I wouldn't expect you to. I would actually recommend you do some trial and error before you take this shit for granted, because a lot of people will just hear this and be like, oh my God, it's a miracle, amazing, and not actually do the digging work to see if it works. I actually take a fairly scientific approach to these things, whereas I test to see if it works. If I'm experiencing something with prolonged symptoms, I think, okay, what might be causing this? And then if I find something that might be causing it, if I express those emotions, do my symptoms go away? Do they seem to correlate? If so, then I can take a lesson from that, integrate whatever part of me caused whatever was going on, become that much healthier and better, unlock my energy and allow it to flow through in a healthier way that doesn't cause disease or pain or anything like that. And there have been some times where my symptoms don't match up with energetic stuff and I just got sick. I don't think this is an all or nothing thing. So the main points that I want you to take away from this are that you can't really repress emotion without eventually facing some kind of negative backlash. Like either that part of you is going to be so tired of being repressed that it's going to force its way into your psyche and you're going to have a fucking identity crisis and you're going to have a harsh interaction with your shadow. It's not going to be very fun. Or the thing will turn itself into a sickness or some kind of physical chronic pain or something like that, in which case you'll have to deal with that. Or it'll fuck up your relationships and sabotage your plans. Like there's no real way to get out of repressing emotion that doesn't lead to some kind of psychological problem or physiological problem. However, if you do start to notice these patterns, wherever they're coming from, if you really get serious about asking yourself what you are doing to contribute to them, more often than not, you'll at least find a way in which you're contributing. And if you can find the way in which you're contributing, integrate it at its source, you'll probably find yourself getting at least a lot more healthier, feeling good in your body, becoming a lot more free, and just feeling better about your life. So let me know if you have any questions about this. Again, I'm not a fucking doctor. So do not take anything I've said as the ultimate truth, because I don't even take what I just said as the ultimate truth. I am constantly exploring, I am constantly seeing what works, and I will always do my best to relay that information to you the best as possible, as humbly as possible. So please, do your own experiments. See what you can find in yourself. See what you can learn in yourself. And maybe report back in the comments. And also, if you think I'm a fucking whack job, you can say that as well, because there's no such thing as bad press. So I love you. I'm Chris Orozco. I'll see you next time.